Welcome to the NJ Criminal Podcast and part 3 in this series.
And so because you did not, just to be clear, you did not have a bachelor's until after, you didn't have a bachelor's before you were incarcerated, so you obtained your bachelor's when you were released, right?
I had actually gotten an associate's degree. Mm-hmm. I had 2 associate degree equivalents before I was incarcerated. One through a community college in Maryland and the other one through the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So at that point in time, you are in prison still. You know that you're going to be released. Was there any type of assistance with or any type of transition plan that you had assistance with, or was it kind of all on you?
It was all on me, and it was, basically through the grace of my friends that were helping me out that I had a place to stay and somewhere to be once I was released in Maryland. And to further illustrate how messy a process it was, the friend I stayed with was an ex-police officer who, was a DC transportation, a DC Metro police officer for 20 years and then retired. And we had met at my work release job when I was at the pre-release center. And he basically took me in, at his home so I could stay there until the paperwork was straightened out. And from start to finish, as someone who's very familiar with the criminal justice system on the beginning side of things, he was amazed at how just lackluster everything was on the way out. Basically it's a wave and, we'll see you later. Don't miss your next probation appointment.
You would think that if the goal of the criminal justice system is to, reduce recidivism on the front end, that there would be better programs and transition programs. I think Oregon's got a pretty good one, but that's not surprising. You would think that all prisons would.
I'm not sure I agree that's the goal of the criminal justice system.
Okay, so tell me, what do you think the goal is?
I think the goal is to basically control a certain segment of the population, whether it's poor people or people who are a certain color or whatever. It basically sticks them in a bureaucracy that's almost impossible to get away from once you're in it. Mm-hmm. And it's mind-numbing, really, how torturous it is, and how people go through their case or do whatever, and then there were people in prison still fighting their case after 20 years, because they wanted to get out. And some of the stuff they were locked up for, the worst one by far in terms of what he was there for and how much time he got was a veteran who got 10 years for not paying child support. And he wasn't not paying it, he just wasn't paying the full amount because his job didn't allow him to. And to me, that just blew my mind. What purpose does that serve to anyone? Like that, now there's no child support getting paid. Like, really?
Right. Well, you bring up a good point. It made me think of Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow.
Right.
But obviously her book focuses on the effect and impact on Black and brown communities. But what we've seen is that this vicious cycle that individuals get into, that you're describing, affects all colors, races, creeds, sexes.
It does. It definitely does, and it spreads in strange ways. And based on what the federal immigration policy happens to be that year, you'll see more people of Latin American descent locked up and waiting to be deported. Stuff like that just never made sense to me. If you're going to just go ahead and deport them, why put them in a state prison for X amount of years? Just go ahead and deport them. Mm-hmm. Stuff like that just never made sense.
Right. So you got released. You got
I
released.
got released.
You got your bachelor's. You went back, got your bachelor's in GIS, Geographical Information Science, because that was what your background was in.
Right.
And what happened after that? You said you had trouble getting a job, and so you went back and got your master's in criminal justice?
Well, it was what happened during that when I guess I was about halfway through my 2 years working on the undergrad. I saw a posting at Rowan for a research assistant job in the criminal justice department, and I began, working with two of the researchers in criminal justice, Dr. Sorg and Dr. Kapijan. And that was kind of funny because I went to the interview. I had already prepared some maps, and I guess they're typically used to, the 18 or 19-year-old, sophomore college kid who probably never had a job before, and they kind of have to hold their hand through everything. I walked in with like a half-completed project of what I thought their project would look like, and they were just like, "Whoa, this is great. Like, when can you start?" And I was like, "As soon as you need me." And then I kind of got nervous because this was my first real job since I'd been incarcerated. And I went back into them and I said, "Hey, just so you know, I'm formerly incarcerated. I'm a felon. If we're going to wind up working, with police departments or anyone, I'm not sure if that's going to be a problem. I just want to give you guys a heads up so you can make a more informed decision." And so they took that and they said, "Okay, well, we're both, reform-minded people when it comes to criminal justice. Like, that's kind of what we're doing here, and we kind of have to give you the job now." And I was like, "I'll take that. Like, that's great." That was it working for me. They want me to succeed as someone who's formerly incarcerated, and they did everything they could to help that. And it's been a great relationship with them since. I've now worked on 3 or 4 different projects with Dr. Kapijan, and I have been published. I have an academic paper out there with my name on it because I helped out and did some GIS work. And so it's great that I could do that, but again, that's not close to everyone who can have that experience or kind of make that connection and be able to, kind of get to the point where there's something in their life beyond the incarceration that's working for them, and kind of it gets to the point where it helps them.
Was that a full-time job?
It wasn't. It was a student worker job, so it's a max 20 hours a week. But I stayed employed. I stayed on projects like that the entire time I was in the master's program as well.
Okay. Talk to me about your experience in the master's program and specifically your thesis and what that's all about. We'll switch gears for a little bit because I'm curious how you have transitioned, your GIS experience into your studies on the graduate level.
I guess I tried to use my GIS as much as I could, and I'm always, focused on the geography of something or the spatial relationship created by a thing. Where a crime happens. I've made maps of, where prisons are in relation to where the crime is. And typically in most states you have a large city like Baltimore and New York City where all the crime happens, and then all the prisons are hours away in some rural area that, doesn't really have a connection to any of this except for the fact that that's where the prison's located.
Why is that important?
It's important because a lot of states, and again, this is one of the things changing, they actually use that prison population in terms of the census to get more representation or, a congressional district.
Oh, wow, I had not even thought about that.
Yeah, so that's one of the big things, and that's one of the things they're trying to fix now, because in the 80s and 90s, with all the prisons being built, to fill with the people from the war on drugs, they began using these prison populations to kind of boost, rural representation, which is typically, again, Republican and not connected to the cities where all these people came from. And not only that, but there's only one state where you can actually vote while you're in prison. I believe it's Vermont or New Hampshire, one of those states, and so you're creating this misrepresentation. You've got all these funds coming in from your census, but none of these people are benefiting from it because they're in prison. So one of the things I've seen in a couple states is that they're rectifying that issue so that those people aren't being counted where they are located in prison. They get counted where they were detained or locked up originally.
So you basically used your experience before your incarceration in GIS and analysis and kind of jumped right back into it. Did people expect you to all of a sudden want to study? I've only asked you about 3 times here, but did people expect you to want to study prison reform, reentry, all of that? And did you did you want to get away from that topic, or were you interested because of your experience?
I was very interested because of my experience, but I'm also limited based on that experience. So I had someone who had been incarcerated with me who got out subsequently on a correction of a legal sentence. Basically, they gave him a second chance. He was a convicted murderer. He's now working on a master's degree in, I believe, public health policy down at Johns Hopkins. Mm-hmm. And we kind of spoke in one of the classes together, Contemporary Issues of Criminal Justice. And we talked about how with all the Black Lives Matter protests and the George Floyd protests going on, we could have nothing to do with that on the ground. We're both still on probation. I'm not stepping foot within 2 miles of a George Floyd protest because on the off chance that I get arrested for just being in the wrong place at the wrong time, that's it. I gotta go back to prison now. So, mm-hmm. I will avoid that problem by just, not participating in that way. But I'm still free to donate money or, pay for someone's bail who I know that got locked up. Those are still options I have. So stuff like that. I mean, you're limited and you're not. I took what I'd learned in prison and put it into my thesis. Maryland is the worst state when it comes to the disparity between racial populations in the general population and the racial population in prison. Jersey's number 2.
Thank you for listening in. Stay tuned for the next part in this conversation. Don't forget to subscribe and like the show on iTunes, Spotify, and anywhere you listen.